ยาสีฟันสมุนไพรดอกบัวคู่
I knew what was coming up, and I was like, bro.
I saw him climbing, and I was about to make a absolutely brutal joke right there, guys.
That was an actual commercial in Thailand back in the day.
Dude, them Asians are racist, bro.
I can't say based, but you know the sentiment.
All right, welcome back to Avoiding Babylon. We've been talking about doing this a little bit behind the scenes for a while. Before we get into it, everybody go hit like and subscribe. We've got a bunch of Christians viewers checking us out tonight. If you guys don't already, please subscribe. Also check out Rob and I's merch store. We got nice shirts. Have you accepted Mary as your personal mother and intercessor? And we do locals as well. But we have a few things we're going to get to tonight. One thing we're going to have to discuss women tonight. Like, I thought we were going to get into Thomism,
the woman question. My favorite.
We're going to have a conversation about women tonight. We have a Harrison Butker update. We have religious hippie causing a stir again. I see a whole bunch of stuff going on that it's just a conversation that we're going to have. But before we even get into that, Christian, I need like a snapshot of your story. Are you a revert, convert, like a 2-minute synopsis?
Oh man, I am not a cradle Catholic. You know, I'm very prejudiced against cradle Catholics. Convert supremacy.
Oh, this is gonna be
okay.
problem.
We're done already.
We got 2 convert Thomists on tonight. This is getting out of here.
Yeah. I did. Oh yeah, Nick, you are a convert. Yeah, I just assumed because your family. Sorry, I don't mean to be the one asking questions, but your family, if I am recalling correctly, were Catholic, right?
Yeah, no, it goes back Catholic for generations, but my grandfather in the 60s got so scandalized because of the church that so many of his children didn't grow up Catholic. And so my dad grew up very, very much so a cafeteria Catholic and then became a Protestant. I don't know what you classify me as, honestly, because I was baptized in the church as an infant, but not raised in it at all. And so practically a convert, technically cradle, if you will. So
crypto cradle.
Yeah,
cradle?
so true.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, so for me, I grew up. My grandfather is actually a Baptist pastor, IFB style, actually more like MacArthurite type. So it's not like Stephen Anderson, I hate Calvinists type. He was pretty Calvinistic. So I grew up in one of these independent, non-denominational, MacArthurite, Calvinistic, expository preaching every Sunday. My grandfather, for like the first 10 years of my life, preached through the gospel according to St. John. Like that type of church. I would say that I always had kind of a religious disposition in me. I would say that I was always disposed towards religion, and I kind of went in and out of caring, not caring. Especially high school, I guess I didn't really care that much, but I would still, I guess, would have identified myself as a Christian. It really wasn't until about my junior year of high school, if I'm remembering correctly, that I started really caring. And once I started really caring, I was actually exposed to like R.C. Sproul and John MacArthur. Once I started caring, my parents took note and they bought me a MacArthur study Bible. And I read through the Bible, all of the notes and stuff like that. I was pretty diligent. I probably have it somewhere around here. I see all my old markings of underlining all the notes that I thought were important and stuff like that. So, I mean, I was definitely disposed towards Christianity during this entire time. When I was a senior, I was exposed to the idea of like a reformed Catholicity, reformed scholasticism type thing. So I was very academically and traditionally disposed, I would say. And as all sort of initiating reformed individuals, I kind of had to decide, am I going to be an Anglican? Am I going to be Presbyterian? Am I going to be a Reformed Baptist? And I decided once I entered into college, because I decided that I wanted to, enter the ministry, I went to actually R.C. Sproul's college in Sanford, Florida. So I was there. I decided, I think Anglicanism, I think the episcopacy is really cool. I think having bishops is really cool. I think they're actually more Catholic in the sense that they would use it. I'm more Catholic, following more so the Holy Fathers. I read some St. Augustine back then, but not too much. A lot of it was mostly focused on the Reformed scholastics. And as an Anglican, you know, you have a lot of different flavors of Anglican. I was reading the Reformed authors of the Anglican school. I was reading some of the Anglo-Catholics. The most famous, obviously, is St. John Henry Newman. I was reading a lot of the other Tractarians. And eventually, after a few years of this, I kind of decided that, you know, Anglicanism's wrong. I was at a church, serving at a church at this point. I was an ordinand, so I was supposed to be ordained. I was actually kind of close-ish to my diaconal ordination. Yeah, Christian converted because of e-girl, so true. I was kind of close to my diaconal ordination, so I kind of cut it off before I really started to enter into the grades of, you know, ordained ministry, and I was more so doing stuff for the parish, catechesis. I mean, I had an office, so that was pretty cool. So throughout this time, I mean, I was praying the Anglican Divine Office. We're having mass and stuff like that. Anglican mass, you know, basically Elizabethan English version of the TLM, because it was from the the Anglican Missal, which is a very high church Anglo-Catholic. So I was very disposed at this point to converting to Catholicism. I had a few difficulties, speculative, and then also difficulties kind of like patristicy sort of issues that I hadn't really figured out. But eventually, my wife, long before me, wanted to become Catholic. Her parents are actually both mother and father Pentecostal ministers. So she is she is a pastor's kid. She wanted to long before me. Eventually, I decided, kind of prompted by the birth of my son. So this would have been 3 years ago. Decided to convert, and I entered in through the ordinariate chair of St. Peter. So I'm an ordinariate Catholic. Unfortunately, the ordinariate parish is very far away from me, so I'm not able to go to an ordinariate mass. So I go to the local based in Red Pill, Novus Ordo. So
is it a unicorn? It's a unicorn mass?
No, I don't. Well, actually, so I go to, I guess this isn't too much of a dox because it's a little bit far away from me, but I go to St. Mark's in Huntersville. So it's Charlotte Diocese. Charlotte Diocese is pretty good. I mean, occasionally I'll go to a TLM, but usually it's a better Novus Ordo that I'll go to on a Sunday basis.
What made your wife want to go before you? What attracted her?
I guess it's more of like the sort of simple faith thing, because she's not too much into theology. I mean, she knows her stuff as much as a lay Catholic needs to know their stuff. But she was kind of just like, you know, what's with all this like esoteric knowledge stuff that's stopping you from doing it? Like, just be normal. Like, this is the real thing. Like,
I like that.
like just be normal. Like all these esoteric things that
Stop
you're
nerding out, dude. Just be Catholic.
Yeah, like these random 17th century whatever guys, like they didn't get it right. Nobody cares about them anymore. Like, just be Catholic. Everybody cares about that. Like, everybody knows what that is. Like, you have to explain 20 times what an Anglican is for anybody to even understand like your position. Then they still ask you, well, are you you're just a cat, like are you just kind of like a Catholic light? So yeah, I mean, it was that sort of disposition. She kind of got into some of the Marian piety stuff as well, which very much, you know, once you accept Our Lady as your personal intercessor and mother, well, once that happens, you know, it's all over. She'll be interceding you all the way into the Catholic Church.
So true.
There's so many stories like that where once Our Lady gets a hold of somebody, that's it. It's a wrap.
It's the death nail.
All right, so that's interesting. All right, so what makes you get into actually being like a public apologist? Because I hear all the time people are always like, I hear it often that Christian Wagner has helped me so much in my faith. He's given me so many books that I should read. Like, what makes you start deciding, all right, I'm going to start streaming and being a public apologist on this stuff?
I mean, I started. So the original iteration was I thought I was real fancy with this. It was Apologia Anglicana. So I actually originally started writing about Anglican stuff and just kind of mostly posting all of my papers that I was writing in school and stuff like that. So it started out kind of as a blog. Some of those are still up. Some of those aren't. I would say they weren't bad. Like I did one on Saint Cyril's Christology. I did a few on Justification in some Reformed authors, a few on predestination and stuff like that. I wouldn't say these were terrible, but that's kind of where I got my start. And then I converted to Catholicism. And I did the dumb thing. When I converted, I probably should have stepped away, but I just kept doing general topics that I already had been studying for a while. And I just I made it explicit though when I moved over, like, okay, I don't want to do apologetic stuff at first. I kind of just want to do the stuff that I'd already been reading about. It wasn't until much later, I would say actually not until like a year ago, that I was explicitly doing like anti-Protestant apologetic stuff, although it's still pretty few and far between on my channel.
Was there a specific topic that lit your heart on fire? Like for me, I remember it was like, I mean, there were several things that did it for me, but I remember especially like when studying scripture, and it was probably a Scott Hahn talk where it was going through like the prophecies in the Old Testament. And one of them is where God promises to unite the 12 tribes again. And he explains how at that point, the tribes have been so dispersed that for all intents and purposes, they had been Gentilized. So the only way that God could actually unite the 12 tribes was by converting the Gentiles. But there was just even going through that entire understanding of what Christ does by making his body the temple, it just kind of like lit me on fire, made me want to go deeper into my faith. Was there anything that happened to you that made you want to just dig deeper and learn all this stuff?
Yeah, I would say for me, it was actually some liturgical issues. It was when I started praying the daily office, because that's something that I don't even know how long I've been doing. I was kind of obliged to do it as a seminarian. You know, they told us, you know, pray your daily office and your Anglican daily office and whatever. So it was that, and I'm like, okay, well, this is really cool. You know, I'd never thought of that growing up, like having this sort of systematic prayer thing that you do every single day. And it seems really helpful going through a lot of the Psalms. We went through the Psalms monthly in the Anglican cycle. So like, wow, this is really cool. I wonder, like, is there a sort of like older version of this? Like, has it always been kind of like the Anglican way? So like I started looking into it, and I was like, wow, this liturgy thing is pretty cool. And I mean, this goes pretty far back, and I want to know how prayer has changed throughout the ages. And I mean, this really kind of placed a few things in my mind, because I realized that when it came to the liturgical prayer of the church, it is almost as important, or even in some cases, just on a practical lay level, kind of more important than the doctrinal pronouncements of the church, because the liturgy is what the people are, you know, normally interacting with. You know, like whatever theses Alexander VI condemned in whatever bull, like that isn't really reaching the lay faithful. It's important and it's obviously binding, but the liturgy is really where you're going to get what's sort of the faith of the general public. So there were things in the liturgy that I was finding out about that were really old and were really contrary to what I had believed in my Protestant days. So I thought that was extremely important. If I can find something in the liturgy that's old and universal, then this is something that if it was against, how do I put this? If it was against the faith, then the church would be completely defectible. And even as a Protestant, I would say, I would have said, you know, the church is not defectible. The church cannot defect. Interestingly enough, I later found out that this was a big justification at Nicaea too. The bigger justification actually at Nicaea too was the prophecies in the Old Testament about God removing idolatry from the people of God. And if the entire church had fallen into idolatry by the veneration of icons, then this would somehow contradict the promises and the prophecies for the continuation of the church. So seeing things like intercession of the saints, or the way in which the Mass was ordered towards remitting the guilt, well, the temporal debt of those in purgatory, and so on and so forth. These things were huge for me, because as any sort of Protestant, unless you are some weird, very high Anglo-Catholic who is ignoring his own formularies and his own tradition of the church and just cherry picking from whatever the Catholics taught, these things are going to be absolutely destructive of these Protestant movements. So yeah, I thought the liturgy was actually kind of cool, which you guys may say, hey, you said the liturgy is important this way, but you're a Novus Ordoite, so what's going on? But yeah, I would say the liturgy was huge, and I could think of other things as well, but that was something that really hit me from early on.
Nick, what about you? You said it was studying justification, right?
Justification's always been my major love, and I think it was actually born out of a heart of, I would say, religious love, if you will, in the beginning of my life. So I can relate with Christian in the sense that when I was young, I kind of had just an inclination toward things of the divine, very much so. And I think for me, what really drew me to justification is that central question of how can I know, or how can a Protestant would say something to the effect of how can I be 100% sure, or how can I be certain, if you will, of my justification? And so I think that question was going on in my head as an early youngster and as a teenager, particularly whenever I looked around and I saw the way that I lived, it didn't correspond with what I was seeing in Scripture. So the main issue that I really had that pushed me toward Catholicism was I would look at a text of Scripture and I would see that justification isn't just a moment and then basically you're good to go after that, and you got your $200 past go and you're safe, right? That's essentially how evangelicalism for me growing up treated justification.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that was huge as well. I remember very clearly growing up in our small church. You would have individuals who would, somehow lament that they had a family member who died, and they would say, "Oh, my family member died, and they weren't a Christian." And the response to that would be the way that they would comfort them and say, "Oh, you never know. One time in their life, somebody may have preached the gospel to them, and they accepted it, and we know that if that happens, then they're good." And looking back on that, that was obviously extremely bad from a very plain reading of sacred Scripture. But justification, for me, was actually the last thing to go. In a weird way, it was kind of like cyclical. It was the last thing to go, but once it went, everything else made sense. In the light of justification, in the light of you have sanctifying grace, and sanctifying grace sort of is the foundation for the entire ascetical and mystical life of the Christian. All of the virtues present, the sacraments are ordered towards sanctifying grace. The incarnation is ordered towards bringing us sanctifying grace, and guilt is destroyed by sanctifying grace. So once I saw everything kind of in the light of sanctifying grace, a lot of things made sense to me that before didn't really make sense to me, especially just the practical way in which historically Christians have acted. Is it would have been, no matter what you can cherry pick, it would have been really weird if, the ascetics of the 4th century had a Protestant view of justification. That would have made no sense.
Exactly. Yeah. It would make zero sense, because you look at the stylites and you're like, all right, why didn't you just accept Christ as your personal Lord and Savior instead of sitting up for your entire life up on a pole? What are you doing? But yeah, I mean, I think for me, why it was justification is because growing up, it was fire insurance. You know what I'm saying? On the most practical level. And now this is where I'm interested to kind of ask you, Christian. So for me, it was justification, pray the sinner's prayer, you're good to go, eternal security. Basically, Stephen Anderson's model of justification. Maybe not to the extreme where he will say things like, you could go out and become a murderer or something and you're still saved if you prayed the prayer at one time. It wasn't that extreme. But for me, I think where it pushed me to investigate more was when I came into contact with Calvinism, the monergistic emphasis in their soteriology of God is the one who saves man, and he draws him by irresistible grace, etc. And for
It's
me,
almost like a
that
tyrant.
well, I wouldn't
Seems
say
tyrannical.
necessarily.
Irresistible grace. I
Yeah,
don't know.
so
It seems tyrannical to me.
it's all rooted in essentially their understanding of free will. But what I'm interested in on the, like, I guess, spiritual level is, for me, that bore a lot of scrupulosity, which makes sense because when you go back and you read the writings of a lot of the Puritans, they'll say that they're saved by justification by faith alone, but yet they're keeping diaries of like all of their imperfections on the side, just to basically test for fruits of whether or not.
Yeah, for them, absolutely. I remember reading about these Puritan authors who they wrote very and I mean I think that there was definitely something going on there, whether it be some sort of understanding of natural religion or whether it was actually extraordinary mystical graces, which though extraordinary are possible, they're writing these actually very touching mystical writings on Christ and the love that they have for Christ. And then on their deathbed, they're absolutely terrified and they think they're damned. And it's really weird because that comes from the fact that they don't have an idea of mortal and venial sin. Because for me, it's actually, okay, if I consider myself, am I in a state of justice? What I'm considering is, have I committed the sin unto death? Have I committed a mortal sin? That's really the question. And Christ is given to his church because we're very tactile individuals. Christ is given certain outward signs, which are true means and instruments of sanctifying grace, the sacraments. He's given those to us, and everything just makes a lot more sense.
Did you ever notice? Okay, there's a couple of things that I want to jump in here with. I think Sola Scriptura has warped the Western mind so much over the last few centuries that we don't see things. We see things very materialistic, and we don't really understand sacrifice like an ancient would. Right. So it was almost easier for a pagan to come into Catholicism than it is for a Protestant to come into Catholicism, because paganism always had sacrifice involved in their worship. They would be sacrificing animals. They would be, things like that. And understanding that you had to have an offering in order to please the gods for them. But for us to understand that when you're going to the Mass, you actually are going to a sacrifice. So when you were saying that, like starting to learn about the saints and the intercession of the saints and stuff, like for me, it was studying how Christianity spreads and seeing how the relics of the saints would ward off these demons. That's how I start to come to understand it. Sounds like for you, it was more intellectual though, right?
I mean, the stories of the saints were huge. I remember very early on, I was somebody gave me a copy of the Ante-Nicene Fathers, and I remember reading through the martyrdom of Polycarp and reading about them collecting his relics. And I'm like, wow, this is like 150-ish AD, and they're collecting all these relics.
Yeah,
like,
the true church apostatized super quick.
I know the true church apostatized so quick. But I guess later, my considerate, what in the world is going on here? There's a vacuum coming in here. Get out of here.
A robot vacuum. It's a robot vacuum.
Gosh, no, it was my wife.
They have robot wives, same thing.
I'm joking, guys. But yeah, I mean, it was a lot later, considering actually the way in which the New Testament, because exactly what you said is the way in which the New Testament kind of pushes. As you look at the end of Mark's gospel, for example, what Mark does, what our Lord does, is that our Lord sends his apostles out and says, hey, people are going to need to know that you guys are actually preaching what I'm saying. You can't just go and preach and say, hey, trust the plan. This is actually from God. I'm actually going to send you all of these various signs of my power in various miracles, prophecies, and such. So really, I think what I eventually concluded to is like, yeah, all this speculative stuff is kind of fun and all, but actually the way in which the New Testament itself is authenticating what where the true gospel is found, where true preaching is found, is strongly in those signs, in those miracles. And also when you read somebody like St. Augustine, and he's talking about in like De Vera Religione and City of God, he's asking like, okay, like where am I finding this true preaching? Where do I find the true church? And he's basically like, go to the Old Testament prophecies about the church. Look in front of you, look in front of your face, look around you. Where is what is described in Scripture as the church? Where is that in front of you?
Yeah.
And like that's huge for people, because I can go to a random individual off the street and start talking to them about these various signs that are coming along with Revelation. And I could, give them theological arguments or whatever that are demonstrative in themselves, blah, 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 blah. But if I'm just like, hey, look, like we have guys who are doing all of these miracles, and hey, look, the Vatican has been very extremely careful about verifying these miracles and making sure these are all true miracles, and what St. Thomas did was witnessed by all these people, or what this individual or that individual is doing by all these people. That individual in the street would just be like, wow, really? Like, where can I read more about this? They'd look into it. And I feel like that is kind of the direction in apologetic preaching that's
I get so frustrated with modern apologetics, because I feel like everything is geared toward just going up against the Sola Scriptura thing. Not just that argument, but that worldview, the Sola Scriptura worldview, and everything is geared towards Protestant apologetics. And those are cool things to know. It's good to know like what scripture verses you can use to counteract their scripture verses that they're coming up with. But to me, seeing a faith lived out, like even understanding what you were saying with the liturgy, like the liturgy is how we embody the faith. If the church didn't have liturgy, the church never would have expanded and actually built culture the way it did. It was the liturgy that actually made people go and live this life out, because every week you're going and living this liturgical life, going according to the church's calendar. So during the feast, you're having feasts throughout the year to keep reminding you of it. This is actually what transformed the face of the earth. And I feel like our apologetics need to be geared more towards the modern pagans, the modern atheists, people like that, as opposed to only going for the Protestant converts. Because I think, I feel like that's all we have right now. And I like the idea of maybe explaining things through church history, or even making people understand the liturgy a little bit better. While we're on the topic of liturgy, though, I have to ask Angela's question that she super chatted last night for $20.
That was a whole 24 hours ago.
Yeah, she wanted to ask you about the pre-55 liturgy, and she asked, do you think it should be reinstated and make that like the standard, or does it matter if it's the pre-55 liturgy?
My personal view is that ideally, the pre-55 Roman Rite would be the ideal, because it is, particularly when it comes to the central controversy that most people associate the controversy of the pre-55 Rite with, which is Holy Week. Those texts of the Holy Week liturgies are some of the most ancient texts we have of the Roman Rite period. I mean, even older than some of the oldest intact missals that we have. And so ideally it would be the pre-55 liturgy. I will say this though, kind of in the intertrad world disputes between the pre-55 and the 62, where of course the sedes go off, is they will say that the 62 has, inherent defects in the sense of being dangerous. And I don't believe that's the case. I believe that even though the 62 is wonky in some of its things, particularly its practices in Holy Week, with things like, the laity responding all of a sudden, and a table all of a sudden out there in the middle of the room, etc. Those things are inherently dangerous.
I've never experienced a pre-55 Holy Week, but all right. So Christian, so you're coming in through studying the liturgy. You do go to a Novus Ordo, but you've gone to the Latin Mass though. You've been to a few of them at least.
Oh yeah. I've been to quite a few Latin Masses. I would say, every 4, 5, 6 weeks, something like that. What's Christian's take on co-sleeping?
You know what co-sleeping is?
Yeah, I know what
co-sleeping your children
is. I freaking hated it.
Was your wife into it? Your wife wanted the baby in bed?
I mean, it was just kind of like a convenience thing. But usually most the way it
Christian,
went.
you gotta understand, on this channel, you have to be for or against it. There's just no.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's no
so
in between.
basically it was against. I mean, we had the crib next to it, and the only reason that the baby would be in bed is if happened to be that the child would not go to sleep, and kind of got to put it between us, and the child would, just like rip my hair out in the middle of the night and play around.
Let me explain something to you. Anybody that says they're in favor of co-sleeping, I remember my kids crawling into bed in the middle of the night. They lay between you and your wife. You're hanging off the bed. You're not comfortable.
So true.
This is all the wife's doing. No husband, no father. I don't care how much you try to convince me you like it. You do not. I don't believe you. You need to tell your wife this is not happening anymore.
Next baby, getting the base double twin bed, and with the double two twins with like the what's it like the table, the side table in the wall. 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 They can pay for it, Putting a wall between us. I can't be scared 20 the entire night that I'm going to roll over and crush my child, Not
so,
all
right.
Good.
So I've seen you like adamantly defend the Novus Ordo, though, right? Like you have.
I mean, some of it's ironic. Some of it's
okay.
Ironic.
That's what I was going to ask. Is it kind of like irony posting?
You
I've seen you say
Zoomers.
Francis is the most base pope ever, kind of stuff. But I know I kind of. All right, I'll give you a little backstory. Like I used to think like all the younger guys were so freaking annoying, and now like you guys have grown on me a lot. So like. A lot of you have grown on me a lot.
With the Novus Ordo, I think it's more of because this is really a pastoral question. I mean, speculatively speaking, I obviously would say that the TLM is, in itself as a rite better than the Novus Ordo. Like if we just put the rites next to each other and compare what makes a good liturgy versus a bad liturgy, TLM is much better. But I guess
comment.
Yeah, but the part that you guys aren't gonna like is, I think this as a pastoral question, what we're asking is, okay, the cat is kind of out of the bag for quite a few decades. So in order to carry out the proper ends of the liturgy for the situation that we're in right now, for your average layman, it's going to at the very least have to be in English. The Latinate culture in the Latin Rite, I know, unfortunate that I have to say a sentence like that. The Latinate culture in the Latin Rite is completely gone. I think it would actually be not because of any defect in the Rite, because a defect in the generality of the faithful. I think it actually would be harmful if we were to just go and impose TLM.
You mean like it was when they just completely ripped it out?
Yeah, absolutely. I am completely in agreement with you. I am completely in agreement.
I always thought like a proper way to handle that would be to put the 62 Missal into effect church-wide, but allow it in the vernacular for a period so that everybody gets used to the rubrics, understands what the Mass is, and then after that 2-year period, just be like, sorry, guys, you're learning Latin.
I mean, I think that there's something to that. I also think there's something to the distinction between the commons and the propers, and the fact that there are certain repetitive aspects of the Mass that could absolutely be done in Latin, and there's no excuse that it's not done in Latin. And it seems like at least that was the original intention of the reformers of the liturgy, that something like the Pater Noster, like that should be in Latin. There's no reason why that's not in Latin.
Yeah.
There's like somebody, even like the most Susan of Susans, after 2 or 3 months could absolutely adapt to having these parts of the Mass in Latin.
Nick, you want to jump in? I know you look like you're ready to champ at the bit.
No, I'm just like, well, it's a nice and naive viewpoint, I guess. I don't know. I've read Bunini's book, and his book, just The Reform of Liturgy. And
I mean, I'm talking about by the reformers. I mean the
oh no, I know.
Were,
I mean the history of the history.
I mean, like the authors of Sacrosanctum Concilium. That's
but Bunini was the head of that whole commission, even of Sacrosanctum Concilium. So that's one of the things of the 12 schemata that came from the Preparatory Council to the floor. 11 were gutted, except for Bunini's, which was the one on the liturgy. Yeah. And then Bunini wrote it intentionally to be ambiguous, mostly so that he. And
I mean, that's most of the documents of Vatican II.
Yeah, exactly. Well, What's funny to me is I find that in the liturgy, like the discussion, people often say, well, like Sacrosanctum Concilium is the most conservative of all the documents. And I'm like, oh boy, that's interesting.
Well, I did say that all I said was that the intention of the document was to retain parts of Latin. At least that's the express intention, even if you wanted to say
I think
they expressed that and then they wanted to kind of backtrack on that when they actually implemented it.
Exactly.
So I'm fine. I'm fine with that.
Because it's just like, even in those sections of Latin where they promote Latin, Latin has, or Gregorian chant has pride of place, Latin must be retained. It's ambiguous. It doesn't tell you what needs to be remaining in Latin. I mean, to your point, there's a certain kind of presumption through little t tradition that it would be the main propers. But then what you find is that the same guy who headed Sacrosanctum Concilium also made the Concilium team. And he was so radical that even people like Boyar, who was fairly liberal, was like, yo, what the heck are you doing, homie? I don't know if you've ever read the story of when he goes, Boyar that is, goes to Paul VI. Not the famous one where he's like, Bunini's playing on us, but the one where he goes and he says, so why did you demand that 300 saints be canceled from the calendar? And Paul VI is like, what are you talking about? 300 saints completely gone from the calendar. So Bunini was he was the perfect politician. He should have been Joe Biden's campaign manager if he would have lasted longer. They probably would have.
I don't know much about the personal. I know the aura that Bugnini has. I don't know much about the sort of personal life and work of Bugnini, so I wouldn't want to at all comment about his intentions, whether for good or for ill.
Yeah, that's fair. He's just, bro, that guy. He's just.
I don't want to make this an argument of liturgy anyway. Like my position on it has nothing to do with like any of the even theological stuff. Mine is this rite is what was the foundation of Western civilization.
That's so funny.
my thing is just that the traditional Latin Mass as we know it now is basically that liturgy I was speaking of earlier that helped build the Western culture that we're in now. It's and when we changed that, I felt like we were ripping the rug out from underneath us, and it just kind of left us floundering. But I don't want this to be a liturgy discussion.
Yeah, I guess all that I'll say is I am myself coming at this from the perspective of somebody in the ordinariate, and the ordinariate has very much shaped the way in which I view pastoral theology. Because I mean, if I was in the time of Saint Newman kind of has a little bit of this lamenting that he had become accustomed since his boyhood of praying in a certain way. And obviously, like when you read through like the Book of Common Prayer, there's the trash parts of it, but it's like 98% of it is, good traditional stuff that was just brought over during the Reformation. And even while you can say like, yes, this is an objectively inferior liturgy to what was the Latin Rite, and it's the opinion of the theologians that the Roman Rite in its traditional form is superior in its safety to all of the other rites due to its proximity to the Roman pontiff and the indefectibility promised to the See of Rome. So the perspective, at least I come from, is I know that at least subjectively, it would have been quite difficult if the church had told me that there is no sort of analogous expression of prayer that I could have engaged in that was in line with the way in which I'd become accustomed. Obviously, if the church said, you have to do this, I would have sucked it up. I would have done it. I would have kind of veered away from all of the translation choices that I'm used to, all of the sort of structure that I'm used to from the ordinariate books that I pray from now. But at least that's the perspective I come from. And I think that there are a lot, and I'm sure you guys would agree, there are a lot of pious people who did have their formation from the Novus Ordo and from the Liturgy of the Hours.
The holiest person I know is a Novus Ordo Catholic. And
so
like the holiest person I've ever met, like the most saintly person I've ever known in my life.
Bro, you've interviewed Bishop Schneider. You gonna throw him under the bus like that?
I don't know him. I don't.
So I think that at least those are the type of individuals that I'm thinking of when I make that statement, is that I could imagine that if there was a radical change where overnight, just like it happened with the original reform, is if there's a radical change overnight to the way in which people were accustomed to praying their entire lives, I can see this as being pastorally damaging. So even if we can have the speculative discussions, and I agree with you guys that objectively speaking, this rite is better, or this use is better than that use, I can't say that I think it would be pastorally prudent to just cut it off like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I have a thing that I think Christian and I will agree a lot on, but I want to throw this out because of the audience, because I get this question in my audience all the time, but also in this audience too. So, Christian, I think aside from myself, you are the only Catholic YouTuber in the English-speaking world that is a fellow manual reader, manual promoter, because it's like everyone, of course, like the only people that know what manuals are maybe are the diocesan priests, and the only thing they know about them is that they're bad because that's what they're taught in seminary.
Yeah,
that's it. And you just ask me, have you ever read one? No. I mean, we kept them under our bed at night, and we would look through them, with a flashlight, but that'd be about it. So, but what I get all the time, and I want you to speak about this, is the authority level of manuals. So I know what a manual is, but can you explain what a manual is, a theology, philosophy manual? What is the authority of it, and why it's not just some old book that we should just discard? Because I get that trope all the time.
Yeah, I guess the best way of thinking about a manual is basically a catechism for priests.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way in which Monsignor Fenton describes them. Is basically you have Rome herself, and then also various diocesan bishops in their diocesan seminaries have certain books that they are themselves stamping with the thumbs up of their authority from certain individuals. Mm-hmm. So in sort of of their material content, they are systematic treatments of theology that go through all of the various different topics in various different areas. I know that sounds very general, but let's pretend like the Trinity. We go through, the unity of God. We go through the relations, the persons, the processions, and so on and so forth, and discuss all of the various different theses that are present here. They would explain the theses. They would show how the magisterium has or maybe has not spoken on an issue, where the theologians historically have agreed versus disagreed, and then they would demonstrate these theses from the sources, so the sources of Scripture and of tradition, and then they would go through and answer all of these objections. And so it's a very good way of systematically and succinctly introducing you to various topics. They're not meant to replace somehow the reading of the fathers. They're not meant to replace the reading of Scripture or any of these other things. They're actually supposed to be complementary with it.
Exactly.
They're supposed to give you a sort of scaffolding to begin with in your theological studies, so you can get your bearings when you're starting out, kind of like a beginner sort of instruction manual. But what's so important about them is because they have this diocesan approval and they had the Roman oversight,
so true,
where the manuals all agree on something, it functions like the consensus of the fathers or the consensus of the theological schools. So the manuals actually do have in their various consensuses, the consenses, I don't know what the plural of that would be, on the fact that something is revealed. They do have a degree of authority in this way. This is unlike post-conciliar theology, because a lot of people ask me, well, you think the consensus of the theologians of the 80s suck, so like why don't you think that those guys, in their consensus have this degree of authority? Well, it's different, because the theologians themselves are usually ordinary priests. Yeah. And in their role as ordinary priests, even in theological writing, they don't really have, an authority. That authority has to be delegated from those with the authority, which are the bishops, and which is obviously Rome. So where there was that oversight and where there was those stamps of approval that the church ordinarily functioned this way, which is about from the 13th-ish century to Vatican II, where it functions in this way and there is this oversight, those authors are expressing the teaching of the ordinary magisterium. Yeah. And therefore, where they unanimously agree on something, this actually is a teaching of the ordinary and universal magisterium, which if it's a matter of faith, then it's what's called an undefined dogma.
Yeah. Exactly. So let me just one clarifying question. whenever you do see in, say, an introduction to theology textbook, and they're breaking down the two sources of revelation, they're breaking down sacred tradition. When they say the consensus of the theologians, they're not just including, say, the OG scholastics up till the time of St. Alphonsus, but you, in a certain sense, could say in areas of unanimity, where they all agree on one subject, etc., they could be
Yeah.
included as well.
Yeah, I mean, usually there's a distinction between the consensus of the theologians and the consensus of the manuals, although it's kind of an artificial distinction, just in the same way that the consensus of the theologian, the consensus of the fathers is kind of an artificial distinction. But yeah, consensus of the theologians usually run until about the time of St. Alphonsus Liguori. And then after this time, we usually talk about the manuals. But as I said, that's just theologians kind of parsing a material distinction for useful
so when you have a consensus of the manuals, is that basically all right? So do they function as like the authentic magisterium, and that is infallible or correct due to its reference to infallible orthodox sources and repetition of orthodoxy?
Yeah, so when there is, and this is important to make this caveat, there is something called basically correct in theology, or theologically certain.
Yes.
Theologically certain, that is, and it is an error in theology to deny it, so it's still a mortal sin against the faith to deny it. But theological certainty is when all of the theologians agree on a certain point. Now, more than this, you can actually have an infallible statement when not only do they agree upon this, but they agree that this is something which is contained in the faith.
Yeah.
So there's two types of notes that can go on here.
Okay, now do you see in the post-conciliar era, whatever,
Era?
do you see some of
the post-conciliar error? That is correct.
Era.
Yes.
Do you see some of these issues that have had consensus being maybe played around with in our current time?
Yeah, what I say for sure, I like to make the point that unless you understand the ordinary and universal magisterium, you are not going to be able to understand how to fight a lot of the post-conciliar craziness that's going on.
So
because
true.
we have a lot of issues that have basically been, some of them longer, but a lot of these are like 1,500 years. You had a little bit of a spat, and then you have complete unanimity or quasi-complete unanimity, a moral unanimity on these various, so true. On these various theologians. And you have this unanimous teaching that goes all the way back there. And then you have individuals, and what they like to say is this is the woman ordination question. This is the question of contraception. There's a lot of different questions. What they like to say, or the purgatory universalism, crap, hopeful universalism garbage.
Yeah.
What they like to say is, well, this hasn't been defined as a dogma, or hasn't been spoken by the church on this way. And this is the case with a lot of moral issues as well.
So true.
They say that the church hasn't spoken in this way, therefore we're free to disagree. That's not the case at all.
Yeah, it's BS.
Because the church does not need to speak in this extraordinary or formal way.
Doesn't have to give anathemas
through exactly. The church can just speak through ordinary organs, which are the bishops, and those who the bishops authorize to teach in their name.
Yeah, this is another good example. Another good
limbo,
example right here.
Yeah,
perfect.
Although
example.
I have a very weird view on the ITC.
Before you get into that, I don't know if this is a serious comment. Post-conciliar just means anything after Vatican II. Just in case.
Colloquially,
okay, you're going to talk about limbo.
Oh, he was just saying that he has. You said it. A nuanced take when it comes to what was it, Benedict XVI's document on it?
Yeah, well,
I've seen your video on it. I actually think it's pretty good.
I don't like calling it Benedict XVI's document, because it kind of makes it seem like it is a magisterial document. The ITC is not a magisterial document. The International Theological Commission has no binding authority over anybody's conscience, unless it's in conformity with the truth. So the ITC document, I don't really care in that aspect. But I actually read it a few times, and I was like, "Whoa!" This, as I read it more, and if you kind of interpret some of the the post-conciliar way of speaking and get actually to what they're saying, like this is kind of based. Actually, this is kind of based, because what they're saying is, hey, it's actually heretical for you to say that you have complete certainty that infants will not go to limbo and they'll have the beatific vision. So like it goes against the baptism being the only ordinary means of the communication of sanctifying grace to infants. So I'm like, whoa, this is actually really based. Why don't the people that actually quote this document read it? And like it actually refutes a lot of what they say.
Yeah.
This is a good question. So you just debated Jay Dyer.
I don't know if I'd call that a debate.
What was the topic?
It was on what's called relations of opposition.
He's I just saw a couple of clips of that debate, and you handled it well, because Jay has this thing where he'll just start badgering someone and like talking over them, and you would just, like the clip I saw, you were just like, Jay, stop. Like, stop, Jay. Like, you would just.
I mean, I knew what I was getting into. I mean, Jay and I are cool now, so I wouldn't want to say anything. I think he's self-aware about the fact that he does that, and I don't think that he would be offended if I agree.
I like Jay outside of the debates. Like, I like as a person, I like Jay. Like, I'll talk to him about, just like deep state stuff. Like, he's really good to talk to about like deep state stuff and things like that, or anything on that topic. But I'll never debate religious topics with him. But as like, can you guys steel man Orthodoxy's strongest position and then say why it's wrong? Like, can you steel man their position? And because I think I would say that the strongest argument for Orthodoxy is just that they still have, like, they didn't have a council to make their church modern, so it looks traditional and it looks like it still has the aesthetic. And it's not even so much that that's a great argument, but when you juxtapose it to kind of the confusion we're dealing with in the Catholic side, that's where the argument comes in, where I can understand people being drawn that way. What do you think the steelman argument for Orthodoxy would be?
I would say for me, what you kind of have to understand is there was something in the late 19th century called Neopalamism.
Yeah.
And Neopalamism was basically a movement because Orthodoxy, you have to understand, Orthodoxy did not have the same intellectual tradition that Catholicism had. So we were actually the ones who reintroduced to the Orthodox works, to the Orthodox world, the works of Scholarius or the works of Palamas, or these various figures. We were the ones who made critical texts and gave it to them, especially Vignay, in the 19th century. So they kind of merged this odd reading of Palamas and merged it to what are called the Kantian antinomies. So these were the various arguments of Immanuel Kant against what we kind of know today as classical theism, although I don't like that term. So I will say that when it comes to these issues of doctrine of God, these are extremely complicated questions, such as, for example, how creation works, or how the relation of God, well, the relation of creatures to God and the logical relation of God to creatures, like how that works. These are very complicated questions. So I think they are very serious objections that do need to be replied to, absolutely. But I don't think I would call them orthodox, because they aren't. Historically, orthodoxy has not objected to natural theology. They have not objected to absolute divine simplicity. They've not objected to a lot of the things that their successors today claim to object against. There's been a lot of good work done recently, kind of dispelling a lot of the false narratives that were woven. Unfortunately, on some part, it's some Catholic authors' faults, but a lot of the false narratives of East versus West that were woven in the 20th century.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say when you get into certain debates about the nature of the papacy, particularly the concept of papal supremacy, you oftentimes, and I'm speaking practically here more so than speculatively, practically, you fall into the danger of just a quote mining war of how many quotes can we bring to the forefront. I think a lot of people get bogged down there. I think if you're wanting just the average layman's personal angst, it's what Anthony is saying, being an average guy in the secular world, right? He hates all of the rainbow crap. He's trying to get out of that world.
Yeah.
He's looking at religion, and then when he compares, Saint Cyril Methodius Orthodox Church to Saint Susan's Faith Community, he's sitting there thinking, okay, this one over here looks like a nursing home. This one over here looks like they're training spiritual athletes. So I think that's where, if I was focusing in on the nature of pastoral applications of theology, I would say, okay, how do we take Gergu's De Revelatione, Merkelbach's moral theology. How do we take that and reintroduce it on the parish level? The most practical way we can do that, two things: liturgy reform and ascetical and mystical theology emphasis when it comes to just the daily life of the Catholic. Because the problem is we, at best, a good priest will give you a good moral theology on this is what you must do. But it's that extra step of ascetical thought where it's, okay, this is what you're required to do, but now do more out of love of God. How do we detach ourselves from the things of this earth? How do I grow in charity for Christ in my soul? Those types of things. And so I think that the Orthodox, because of their ascetical emphases that you do see, do have the appearance of offering that to your average normie out there. And we got to be better at showing that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few directions kind of to go there, because obviously the marks of the church are important. A lot of people misunderstand the marks of the church, because, like, for the mark of holiness, for example, it would be ridiculous for us to state, like, hey, the mark of holiness means that we have more holy people than another church has. Rather, the mark of holiness is we have the means and doctrine which leads to holiness. And if you firmly apply them, if you firmly apply yourself to them, then the majority have ordinary holiness. Some have extraordinary holiness, and other ecclesial communions, to use the Vatican II term, other ecclesial communions only have smaller parts of that and are much less effective. So a lot of people misunderstand that, but I feel like when it comes to Orthodoxy in particular, this is kind of a double-edged sword for them. On the one hand, a lot of these individuals are in a Western context, so they are really going into churches that are usually a lot more serious than you would get in the home country. We're in the home country when it comes to Catholicism. So I feel like it would kind of be an opposite situation if you went to some of the Eastern countries and looked at, like, Catholic missionaries in, Saudi Arabia. So Catholic missionaries in Saudi Arabia, missionary communities in Saudi Arabia versus, Orthodox communities in Greece.
I'll point something out, because most of the Orthodox debates I always hear, like even the one you had with Jay, it was about some obscure topic that goes back to this council and this time, and it's like, I don't think the ordinary person should ever have to worry about what was said in some council 600 years ago or 800 years ago. I just don't think, like, just on face value, God would not obscure his church like that. He's not, God would not retain his church for the wise only. Like, he has a deep love for the lowly of this world. Yeah. And the Catholic Church is the church that went and converted the nations. And you have to take that into account when you're comparing these two traditions. Okay. So Nick, you said you wanted to split it an hour?
I'll bug out in a few minutes.
Hold on. Before Nick goes, how can people get started with the manuals? Like, where should they start?
If you don't master the masters ones at the beginning, you're done. Just got to go.
I mean, you can. There's a lot
recommendation
of levels. I would say there's a lot of levels when it comes to manuals.
And you've done a lot of actually reprint work. When it comes to,
why didn't I think of this? I have a whole website page full of manuals that I collected. It's pinned on my website, christianbwagner.com. Recommended reading list of manuals in philosophy and theology. So I have them all. I have a lot of them ordered after difficulty and stuff like that. But a reminder, you guys should subscribe to my YouTube channel. I forgot to mention that earlier.
But why should we subscribe to your YouTube channel?
Yeah, do that. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for base Novus Ordo content.
All right, so here's what I want to do. I want to segue topics a little bit. First, I think we should start off playing the Harrison Bucker clip, Rob. And that'll segue us into discussing the two sexes, because I think we have to have a conversation about men and women right now. And I think some things are I'm seeing the way the whole thing with religious hippie went down. And I really think people are misunderstanding why people are upset about what she's doing, because I see a lot of people defending her, saying, if you can't see a picture of a girl dressed modestly, then you're a coomer and you have and it's like, that's not at issue here. I think
Coomer? What did you?
a
What did you?
Coomer is somebody who just watches
We're gonna leave it at that.
I was like, what did you say?
somebody
A
watching
Coomer
garbage
who's
on the internet.
gooning. Coomer that's gooning.
Yeah. So
Gotcha. I was
I
like,
think-
what is he saying?
I think the main issue that
My homeschooling ears are still kind of a virgin to a lot of things.
I think the issue that your average guy will see with a woman doing this regularly, and I'm saying this to the women that watch our show too, because I know a lot do. When a girl posts selfies regularly, it's one thing if you're at some big event or something, you want to post a picture. That's not what we're calling out. It's this regular posting of selfies. It isn't about when I see that I'm tempted. It's that modesty is actually not just about what outfit you're wearing. It's about humility. And when somebody posts regular pictures of themselves, it comes off as arrogant. It comes off as I look pretty and I want likes and I want to get the compliments from everybody when I post this picture. And you have to understand that humility is actually what's attractive to people by and large. And that goes for men and women, right? Like if you see a guy who works out and he's constantly posting selfless selfies, shirtless selfies. Sorry, guys, I'm stroking
Selfless selfies. You gotta love those.
I'm stroking out here. Shirtless selfies. It's his arrogance will gross you out as a woman. It just will. Like, I don't care how good a shape you're in, dude. We don't care. Put your stupid shirt on. We get it. You took care of yourself. There's something to just not coming off as arrogant.
The nature of the issue definitely changed too after she got married. Like that adds a whole nother level of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if my broad was doing that, no, I can't say that on stream.
No, I would take my wife's phone away if she was doing that.
I'd go skeet shooting with the phone, you know.
Basically, Catholic e-girl Twitter shouldn't look like the Vatican when they invite the circus in, is what you guys are saying.
Yeah, no, it's just
I mean, for me, it's basically like when you read sacred scripture and you read like our earliest ascetical authors, like St. Clement of Alexandria or something like that. Like the huge focus of modesty, because back then, obviously, you didn't have women, going to church showing cleavage. Like that wasn't what Paul had to address. But the big concern with modesty is, you had women with like braided hair, gold jewelry, makeup is a huge thing, which actually Pope Francis is based on the makeup question. He hates makeup. But you have all of these issues of women doing these extraordinary things to draw attention to themselves and to draw forth attention to themselves. Like that's the huge fundamental problem when it comes to the modesty question. It's like that's why like a humble and modest spirit is a spirit that doesn't draw attention to themselves. So the Catholic e-girl is the complete antithesis to modesty. So we're not saying, we go in there and we see this and we're tempted. Like that's stupid. Like obviously not. Like I when I see a woman wearing, a designer veil, I'm not like, having movements of concupiscence or anything like that. It's rather the fact that people are looking at this and this is some sort of attention that the individual is seeking in order to cause some sort of enjoyment for them. So that's the issue that we're pointing out.
Yeah, and look, this is something that we even have to be careful pointing out because every one of us have this attention-seeking desire, right? Every time I fire off a tweet, I'm hoping for likes, I'm hoping for reaction, I'm hoping our show gets a lot of views tonight. I understand the irony of me talking about
my number one prayer when joining you was, please, dear Lord, do not let us become famous.
Yeah, no, we'll never be famous. Even Taylor
the Lord will answer your
prayer.
and
he's like the biggest guy doing this. I mean, come on, we're in such a niche celebrity category that like you'll never be famous. But yeah, it's about dopamine hits, right? But there's also like, look, there's a level of narcissism that has to exist in any one of us that are willing to get on camera and put our voice forward as if we're some kind of, you should listen to what I have to say. Like we all have to be on guard for this, right?
It's basically a form of when you see this in examinations of conscience all the time. Like, are you vain? Sometimes they'll ask like very pointed questions like, why did you work out? Was it because you were trying to grow in actual strength, or was it because you're just increasing your vanity, stroking your ego, if
Yeah.
you will. And I think that, again, I don't know her intentions. I don't presume to know her intentions, but I think that that's just the overall thing that we can draw out of a lot of these situations, which is if you are constantly trying to get self-validation, then it leads one to assume that it's rooted in some form of vanity.
I think this is what a lot of people even take issue with the former adult actress who converts, right? So you saw the girl that was on with Michael Knowles and stuff. To go from a career where you're in such a attention-seeking, like you have that attention-seeking career where you're taking your clothes off from it. Now to go right from that into being some kind of evangelist, you're still dealing with that attention-seeking problem. You just now your clothes are on, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, it's extremely dangerous because you're going into this now with a because obviously I don't think this individual had bad intentions or anything like this, but you're going into this with now a basically impenetrable foundation, well, impenetrable shield around you. Because who's going to critique, the former OnlyFans hoe turned, pious, mass-loving Catholic woman? Like who's gonna like that story? Who's gonna attack that? And if you attack that, you're a bad person, because all she wants to do is she wants to tell how God has transformed her and how she wants other people to be Catholic. And I sympathize with that.
Well, and I do think there is a place for it also. Like, I do think there's a place for it. I don't think that place is going on Matt Fradd's podcast, going on Michael Knowles' podcast, going on. Like, I just don't think that's the place for it. Maybe speaking to other women, maybe like doing things like that. That might, because I don't know, man. I struggle with this too, because it, like, sometimes some of the things irk me and I'm like, and I roll my eyes at it. And like you said, on the other hand, you don't want to like just start bashing a new convert and be like, you know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's a tough subject.
Yeah, I think one could make maybe a distinction and say that individuals who genuinely repent and they're invited on a big podcast to tell their story, I think that's fine. But where the line is crossed is whenever they will throw upon themselves the mantle of authority on that said issue after that and make their entire, if you will, public life that said issue. It's not to say that they don't have an incredible story or thing to add to the conversation, but it's that, especially if you're entering into faith, you need to take that time of baby steps. And I'm reminded, even though this is a separate context, I can use it by analogy. When St. Paul's giving his admonition to St. Timothy, he talks about not laying hands on no man suddenly to not be partakers with their sins. He's talking about ordination in that context. He's saying don't ordain a novice lest he be filled with the pride of the devil and fall. Kind of on a natural level, you could do the same thing. If you see a guy who's overcome drugs or something, have him tell his story, but you want to make sure the guy's mature, because what if he just falls right back into doing drugs, or what if he starts doing stuff that's kind of close to it?
Even in AA, they won't let you become a sponsor for years. Yeah. Because they want to make sure you're stable before you come there. St. Paul, he has his conversion. He stays in Tarsus for 15 years before he actually goes and gets his mission to go and preach to the Gentiles. He spends 15 years studying the scriptures, learning how to live this life out before he actually gets his commission to go out and preach to the Gentiles.
I always tell people that I think the most interesting seminary experience must have been like St. Paul in Arabia on Mount Sinai, basically receiving all of the new covenant by download.
Right. And that's really what it was. It was by download. Like, he just has this revelation and everything.
Who the heck was talking to him out there? So
yeah, I saw somebody mention she should donate her money to a charity for single mothers and go to a convent. But I mean, like, traditionally, unironically, go to a convent and spend the rest of your life in penance, because there is a certain gravity. Like, obviously, we all understand our pre-conversion sins. There is a certain gravity to that sort of lifestyle, being a working woman, and that gravity requires a very sort of grave acts of penance, and that usually involved go to the convent for the rest of your life.
Mortification of the flesh. See,
Yeah.
I the only thing I question about that is, dude, I lived a pretty bad life. Like, I really did. I lived a pretty rowdy life before I was married. And
maybe you should be sleeping on the floor then.
yeah, maybe I should be like wearing hair shirts.
Maybe you should bring the babies in bed every single week.
There's a co-sleep as a penance.
Anthony actually makes his wife sleep on the couch.
No, I'm not.
W Chad King.
That is not even an exaggeration. If me and her are fighting, she takes the couch. I'm taking my bed.
I mean, it makes sense. I don't know why guys get banished to the counts. They must. Be
I know. I freaking bought the bed. Like, I'm gonna sleep on it.
You pay the bills over the roof,
bro.
Like,
I pay the mortgage around here. I bought that freaking bed right there. You know, either make up with me or you're sleeping on the couch.
Christian, the other thing is you have to understand 99% of the time, she's the one that doesn't want to talk to me. So it's like, all right, you don't want to talk to
that's
me.
a dog.
It's not like I don't care.
No, Anthony, trust me, we do understand that.
so true, Rob.
Thursday said we were being too serious right before we started joking around.
Yeah, women getting the silent treatment is such a blessing. Like, why would
No, dude. Oh man, that's okay. So I think that's a temperament thing because my wife can literally not talk to me for a week.
It was delightful.
I did put him on the couch. My wife can go without talking to me for a week, and I'm like, I'll lose my mind. I'm like, I want to hash the stupid fight out. Like, I'm like, whatever the issue is, I want to fight it out and get it over with. She'll just shut down and she'll go, I don't care. And she won't talk to me for days on end. And I'll be losing my wife has a superpower.
It's because you don't have autism, my friend.
No, she's just got a superpower. So, all right, why don't we play the Harrison Bucker video and we'll go from there.
Thursday said we need to play the newest Pints short right now.
Where is it?
Oh, is this going to be cold?
I'll find it right now. I'll pull it up.
Yeah, let's see the latest.
Yeah, I know you guys are friends with Matt Frad, and I love myself some Matt Frad, but he sometimes posts some darn coal.
Oh, coal.
Coal.
He just commented on one of our videos today. Don't put me in a bad situation.
Well, to be fair,
I appreciate you. I love you, but you post some coal, bro.
Was that Matt or was that Thursday that posted that?
No, that was Matt.
My boy Thursday.
That was definitely Matt. You can see by how cordial and polite he is. Like, true. Matt's very Australian. Like, he's very polite. It's like, there's a very, very lovely point you made about this. Thank you very much.
I'm just wanting Pints with Aquinas to talk about Thomism again.
You know that Matt Frad thought that I was like an SSPX rad trad.
Well, even this whole thing that we're talking about now, I see everybody's like the rad trads are coming down on them. Like, these aren't rad trads. These are like the most normie.
These are like Novus Ordo supremacists coming.
Yeah,
down.
they legit are Novus Ordo supremacists. Pope Francis is amazing Catholics, and I think that all of us need to be aware. Look, I had a friend call me out for things I was like images I was posting of whether it was family. I'm not going to say what it was, but somebody called me out and they're like, "Dude, you got to stop doing that," and I did. Because I realized even me posting pictures, I posted a picture of my wife. My wife's very pretty. And it's like, dude, you're doing that for attention. Don't do that. So I stopped doing it. You have to be very careful with this stuff because we're all susceptible to it. So it's not me even pointing the finger at religious hippie. I mean, we were goofing on it today. And, I put a couple of posts up saying, if somebody posts their mass fit, and a guy lusts for her in his heart, is she responsible for his sin? But I say that just to rile people up and things like that. It's not
really. I had no idea by the tweet right before that.
What was
Wait, you want me to answer that?
Hold on, I'm gonna post a nuke.
Yeah, I was about to say, do you want me?
All right, wait a minute. While I got the Thomas on, I want to ask this question. Okay, this one made everybody so mad tonight. If a wife refuses her marital duties to her husband and he resorts to watching something improper on the internet, does she bear any responsibility for the sin?
I actually went and thought about this question. So at first, when Anthony texted me this question, I was like, "Frick, bro, what the heck are you doing?"
That was the nuke. That was the nuke, Rob. I said, "Okay, guys, I'm about to drop a nuke. Brace yourselves."
So to answer that question, though, so. If the wife was not giving the marital debt and it wasn't for a just cause,
or just a one-time thing, we're talking about a prolonged.
Yeah. If it's
prolonged issue,
I'm saying if it's a prolonged issue and it's not for a just cause, So that's obviously a sin, right? That she's committing, right? She's committing a sin. And what it becomes is an occasion of sin to that husband to go and do bad things. Now, if the husband goes and says, watches improper material online, etc., that's on him.
Yes.
Specifically. That is specifically on him. And the reason that that's on him is because ultimately at the end of the day, he is the one who has to pull or push the starting button in the will to go and decide to do.
So she shares some culpability, but she is not responsible for it.
It's basically the sin of scandal.
Yeah.
Like that's what it amounts to, is because obviously there's a distinction between placing somebody in the remote circumstances for sin and placing somebody in the proximate circumstances for sin.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like, let's say, you invite somebody over your house and they don't have alcohol problems or anything like that, and they just happen, to just drink and get drunk. That's actually a remote occasion for sin for them. So like, obviously you don't bear any sort of responsibility or anything like that. You didn't commit scandal by taking the alcohol out. But if that individual, they're an alcoholic, and you understand that you are placing them in a proximate occasion for committing a sin, then you are responsible due to scandal. Mm-hmm. So the question becomes, okay, obviously it's mortally sinful without just cause to deny the marital debt. Like we all know that. But if you deny it in such a way that is habitual and is long standing, that obviously can place somebody in a proximate danger to commit that sin, and therefore they bear responsibility insofar as they committed the sin of scandal.
Yeah,
that's a good answer. I like it. Yeah, I wasn't, when I said it, I wasn't accusing women of anything. It's just like
yeah, but I mean, this is like what my point is. At least for mentioning the like, oh well, it's a sin anyways. Is you're just adding another sin upon the multiple sins that you've already committed by habitually denying without just cause. Okay, without just cause, guys, without just cause, denying it habitually.
My whole point is, I guess, and this, Christian, like if you read even an English translation of a moral manual, the 6th and 9th commandments are always going to be in Latin most of the time for a reason. And Anthony decides to take his own disputed question and chuck it out on Twitter and be like, yeah, what do you guys think?
Yeah.
That's like the okay, so this may be if you have your kids watching at home, this may be
the moment to turn
a
off.
little above PG.
I don't have a disclaimer for that, believe it or not.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, you knew I was going to be on here, but there was a certain article on certain sodomitic acts, in marriage example. That was
I'm so sorry.
That was posted. that was posted by the Catholic intimacy folks, the ones that made the Catholic sex toys.
Yeah.
So these individuals, they made their Catholic sex toys and butt stuff article. And Hassan and I, autism moment, we read through it to refute it. We had like a whole stream on refuting it, because there's a lot of people who were reading it. We're like, oh, this is so based. So I was just on stream about, what was that, an hour and a half ago. And we were listening to something from Religious Hippie and her fiance, now husband. And he mentioned the 3 schools on the questions of marital intimacy. And I'm like, there's only one place that I've ever read out of all of the billions of pages on this that I've read that mentions the 3 schools on this question. And it's the Catholic intimacy site article on butt stuff and sex toys. I'm like, this guy, it's Religious Hippies on stage reading that stuff.
Our friend Kyle interviewed that couple, and he got in trouble at his church. Everything, like, he went to church and like they all like yelled at him. They were like, "Do this," and he was like, "Oh my god!" He had to take the interview down and stuff.
All I heard in that
base TLM community.
All I heard in that entire rant was that Christians read billions and billions of pages on sodomitic acts. That's all.
On butt stuff.
Somebody has
billions
to do
of pages
it.
on butt stuff.
Somebody has to do it. Look, I am the chosen one. I had to do it.
You are chosen one. No, that was I remember that stream. That was what was it, like a year ago or something? That was a
Oh
pretty funny one.
gosh,
year
I
and a
mean, that
half,
was.
yeah.
I eventually kind of just gave up on even talking about it, because it would just like over and over and over again. You'd explain these things to individuals, and they just kind of were just like really upset about it. You know, they were really
What's
upset.
AI for?
So
They,
so
they were the ones who.
here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go to locals unless you guys want to super chat us to stay on YouTube. That's how it's gonna go. So you guys got like a minute and a half to super chat us, at least $100 between all of you, or we're going to locals. So.
While they do that, we can watch this.
Yeah, we'll play the short from Pints.
Oh,
You
this
guys,
is the one
you
you
want us
got.
to stay here, you got to cough up some cash. Otherwise, we're going to locals.
Stupidity is also a gift of God, but one mustn't misuse it. You know what sucks? That. Also, you doom scrolling, doofus.
That's
All right,
all right.
All right,
there's
Matt on his boomer arc. I see.
I was about to be like, this show used to be.
Hello, fellow kids. That literally has the "Hello, fellow kids" vibe from Matt.
That's my age, bro.
Bro, you're old. I tell you every
I
episode.
know I'm old, but listen, I'm trying to stay young with you guys. Like I'm gonna be.
Yeah, you knew Coomer. I mean, that's impressive. You know, you knew what Coomer meant.
I have an
I didn't even know
18-year-old
what
son. I have an 18-year-old son, so I do know some of the lingo. All right, yeah, we're gonna jump over to locals because we do
You're
have.
gonna skibbity riz it up. Skibbity toilet.
Stop with the ARS money. It's
This is
not real money.
Argentinian, right? This is
Those are
Argentinian.
so annoying. The ARS, because there's like, isn't it like $2? But it pops up like it's a bunch of money.
No,
right?
that is literally like 3 cents.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is it
yesterday
like-
he sent us 3,000 yesterday. I get so excited, like, oh wait, it's 30 cents. All right, so we're gonna jump over to locals. We're gonna play the Harrison Bucker video. We got I found a woman perfect for Nick. Should we
Oh
play
yeah.
that?
Oh yeah.
You didn't send me
Think
that, I
so.
don't think.
It's in WhatsApp.
Oh, it's that.
I'm sitting
that
in
news one.
Let's play that real quick. It's not that she's actually perfect for Nick. She just uses Nick's catchphrase. Let's
It's
play that.
copyrighted
Okay,
too.
hold on.
Listen
Yeah.
to this lunatic.
Let me find
We
it.
got more videos to come if we go over to the other side, though.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Olympics, they are back, but so too is the COVID. A number of athletes arriving in Paris and testing positive. Do you believe the Olympics, do they have the chance of becoming maybe a super spreader?
I think that's for sure, 1,000%. Listen to what's going on. You've got 15 million people coming into Paris, a city of what, 2.1?
Where did
Broad-
they find this woman? Like, these people are still talking about COVID as if it's real.
Honestly, if I had to listen to that for more than like 20 seconds, I'd probably like, blow my brains out or something, dude.
My phrase is copyright. I'm gonna sue that lady.
You should. All right, we're gonna go over to the other side. We're gonna do the Harrison Bucker video. We're gonna talk about this woman proposing to the man. We got the video of the woman proposing to the man, and then we'll just riff. We'll go from there. So come over to locals, guys. $5 a month. Come on. We're gonna come up with tiers where if you guys want to actually join us for the show, anybody that joins the $20 tier, you'll actually be able to sit in on a local show with us. Rob, did you put those together yet or not yet?
No, yeah, no.
Maybe over the
That's
weekend
gonna
we'll
be,
get that
that's gonna
done.
be a weekend thing, yeah.
All right, so we'll do that over the weekend, and then by next week we'll be able to do that. So
How
we'll
about,
see
how
you
about for
guys.
$50 a month, you could be a part of one of Anthony's stories.
I don't know if anybody wants to be part of one of my
I was gonna
stories.
be like, I don't know about that one.
All right, yeah, maybe we'll get into the JQ over there too.
Oh boy.
You know, it honey, give me more wine.
We'll see what Christian's take is on the JQ. All right, guys, we'll see you over
Okay.
behind the paywall.
I'll cut us off here. Give me a second.